But I hope you also manage to have these discussions calmly and in a friendly way. If only everything in the world were possible to discuss calmly and in a friendly way. So thank you for spending that time. I pray that you will have been hearing each other and through this process, hearing some of what God has to say. But what God has to say and what we want him to say are not necessarily fully the same things. We've got a lot of questions, and it's not clear that this passage answers all of them. But it does answer some, and there may be other questions we'd love to sort of twist it to answer that it really doesn't. So I'd like to wrap up by trying to piece together, moving from the idea of what is our part in this, which was these discussions, in the direction of what is God's part in this, which needs the big picture, this passage and beyond. But before I do, I guess it's worth checking. Would people like to do a show of hands on whether people had a yes-no answer to any of those questions? Do you want to try and see if we're agreed on anything? Yay, someone's interested. Okay, so let's just do a show of hands. Raise your hands if you think that Christians should be willing to fight to defend their own country. There's quite a few hands. How about a show of hands for people who think Christians shouldn't be willing to fight to defend their own country? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Yeah, so there is a choice to make, and it might be different in different situations. Yeah, because the next question about if your country decides to attack another country. If you join the military, you're not going to have the choice, are you? I mean, if your country decides something you disapprove of, you already signed up. So we won't even bother with hands of that one. And in support of Christians, I guess that's a harder one. Show of hands who think Christians might fight in support of Christians. Any hands up for that? Oh, okay. And finally, in support of the modern nation of Israel. Show of hands for people who feel it might make sense to be fighting or supporting fighting in support of Israel. Goodness. Okay, we haven't got hands for those. So we're tending towards pacifism in this room, but without necessarily saying you don't fight to defend your country, where we're a little split. Before we launch into God, maybe a quick story from my experience. I think stories help here. My parents grew up during the Second World War. I mean, they were teenage during the Second World War. My dad was old enough that he could have fought, but they sent him to college to learn engineering instead. My dad's cousin, in the years leading up to the Second World War, was a young adult. He was a very good boxer, physical guy. And during the 1930s, when Hitler was coming to power in Germany, Mosley was leading right-wing brown-shirt fascist party, a political movement in England. My dad's cousin was a thug for the brown shirts, which meant he would protect them at their rallies to make sure that no one could cause trouble, but also they would go and cause trouble at the political rallies of other parties. He was literally going around beating people up. Now, if I ask for a show of hands of people who think that's the kind of fighting that makes sense, it's not going to happen, is it? Even our family have treated him as a black sheep of the family because that wasn't approved of. I mean, he did also steal cars. He went joyriding at a time when joyriding wasn't even a thing. I mean, this is ahead of his time. But, sorry, the sad part of this is that by the Second World War, I think he had a change of heart. It's not written down in detail. But he joined the British Army. He fought against fascism. He died in North Africa fighting. He never married, he never had kids. I and a few of my family are the only ones who will remember him. And I guess the second kind of fighting makes him respectable to English people who were relieved that people did fight and that we didn't lose the war. But is one better than the other? I mean, you can see the conflicts. It's really hard. Where do we draw the lines? Are there times when God has called us as a community to pick up arms and win a war? Through history, lots of countries or communities have said that. I think my first point is that today's passage, which is clearly about the nation of Israel, who were at that time God's covenant people and God's only covenant people, are being called to pick up arms and fight to take the territory God has promised them. I do not believe there has been another time in history where Bible believers can claim the same command. Even Israel couldn't claim the same command at other times. No Christian army that has raised this passage saying, look, God is with us, God is the Hornet is going in front of us, is being faithful to the original context. Not really. They might be claiming they've got a new prophecy of some kind, but they can't claim that this passage is telling people who follow God to go and invade territory. And after all, think about it. What territory are Christians promised? New heavens and a new earth. It's either none of this earth or the whole of this earth. The visions in Revelation are of a restored heaven and a new Jerusalem and a new earth, a whole new planet, or our planet renewed, perhaps. We don't have territory that we can claim is this bit's ours. Not even consecrated sacred space. There is no temple in the vision of heaven. So people have told me, isn't it horrible that churches in the UK are becoming out of use and being turned into mosques? That must never be allowed. On what basis? The whole earth is God's. On that basis, you have to be saying we should never allow a mosque anywhere. On what basis are you going to do that? God has given us the freedom to choose at this stage. And this leads into the situation in Canaan. Because the Canaanites were not just random people who happened to be in the way, and bulldozer politics was coming into place because they wanted space. This is not Israel deciding for themselves they got their eye on a nice piece of land. This is not national ambition, but it's not actually either racial hatred. This is God bringing long-awaited judgment on 7 particular nations for their particular sinful practices. That's the way it's explained in Genesis to Abraham, more than 400 years before, and echoed in Deuteronomy. And on the whole, those practices seem to have included sacrificing children to their gods. The Bible talks about sacrificing, putting children through the fire. Whether they were burned alive or killed first and burned, we don't even know. And it does seem to have happened. And certainly round the coast in Carthage, which seems to have been a related culture, there are not just hundreds but thousands of burials under monuments of urns full of the burned remains of sacrificial animals. Mixed in among them are the burned remains of thousands of sacrificial babies or children. So at one level, the presentation here is that these people are worshipping other gods. But along with that is that their worship practices are what we today would call inhuman. And what Deuteronomy later describes as involving demons. Now, the concept of demons is fluid. You have to work out what that means. The Greeks were very proud that demons were beings that they were connected with. It just meant a spiritual being that had power to them. But when we know that there is one true God and these things are not truly an aspect of worshipping to God, we can see why God wanted to bring judgment. So, this passage is not focusing on Israel's benefit. It's not focusing on hatred or greed. It's focusing on Israel's commitment to God and God's judgment on these particular 7 tribes, only 7 named tribes. My dad made a mistake over this because when he discovered that the girl I was interested in was Indian, on the phone that night, the first thing he said to me was, "Doesn't the Bible tell you not to marry foreigners?" It's in this passage, but it says don't marry these 7 named tribes because of their particular religion. It's a different thing. So, this passage is about God fulfilling his promises, a promise to bring judgment and a promise to give Israel a land to live in. It is not a promise that future generations can decide to invade and claim this as God's blessing on our invasion, taking territory. And it's certainly not a promise that Christians can treat our territorial ambitions the same way. So, how does this Old Testament picture fit with the New Testament? In the Old Testament, it's worth noticing that there is nowhere any concept of pacifism. The Jews were a nation that had to survive among the other nations, and the nations did regularly invade. So it may seem terrible that the Jews get to do this invading, but built into this is the warning that if the Jews are not faithful to God, they themselves will in the same way be invaded. This is a warning from God that Israel never actually listened to, and that ended up coming true. So they could look back to God protecting them as they came out of Egypt, where God protected them without them having to fight at all. Here, God is going to protect them as they do fight. In the end, because they were not faithful, God did not protect them. God brought the Assyrians to destroy half of the nation of Israel, the northern kingdom. God brought Babylon to destroy the southern kingdom. God did what he promised. The rest of Deuteronomy will talk through this a little bit more. So, were Israel special? God here is saying, you were the fewest of all nations. It's not because you were strong. It's not because you were special. But I have chosen you. The relationship that God chose with Israel was special. That's true for us too. The relationship God has chosen with us is special. There's nothing special about us as people. We are not better people than our neighbors who follow other religions. We're just the same. We're made in God's image. Does God love us any more than them? It's not clear. But we have accepted a covenant relationship, which means that that relationship is special. And yet, God is not promising to be a Hornet for us. So, the Old Testament doesn't have the concept of pacifism, but the New Testament does not have the concept among Jesus' followers of militarism. A couple of swords to protect yourselves against bandits on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, which we've heard about in the stories. Yeah, perhaps. We do not have New Testament permission to be violent. Not that I can see. Put it on the WhatsApp to everybody if you can spot it. what we do have is something, a new covenant through Jesus, which is on different terms. When Jesus is saying, love your enemies, it's not that those people are truly our enemies. We don't pick and choose who are our enemies. We don't make enemies of people. These are people who've chosen to treat us as enemies, surely. Because Jesus is saying, love them. And for those who persecute you, pray for them. I don't see how you can do that at the same time as picking up your rifle and joining the army and shooting at them. So, the new covenant is on a different basis. And one reason is that although Israel were supposed to be God's treasured possession, as it says here, to show off what it's like having a great relationship with God for everyone else to see, now we, as Peter will tell the Christians in the New Testament, we are now God's treasured possession to show off what it is to have a special relationship with God, not only for others to see, but for others to join in with. So the challenge is not to create a nation that can defend its borders, but to play our part in the kingdom of God that has no borders. There is no territory to invade. It's all God's. The New Testament is about the spiritual warfare. And this is where I want to end. My point till now has really been you can't claim this as justification for a war, trying to start it as though it's a God-inspired war. I don't think you can. But the language of warfare is still there in the New Testament, and it's spiritual warfare. And this is where God truly fits in. Is God a fighter? And are we? Yes, absolutely. But not with guns and drones. Not against people, but for people. God is fighting a war against Satan and his forces. God is the Lord of hosts. Do you know what the Lord of hosts is? Not the Lord of people who lay out food for guests. Not that host. Not hosts and hostesses. God is the Lord of hosts, meaning thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of the heavenly host. And are they a choir or are they an army? In eternity, they are a choir because the fighting will be done. But in the book of Revelation, we see them as an army. And who is leading that army in Revelation? Jesus is proclaimed in Isaiah as the Prince of Peace. But he's portrayed in Revelation as the rider on the white horse. The one whose name is the Word of God. This is in Revelation chapter 19, if you look it up later. And on his thigh and on his robe is written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And he is fighting against Satan, but also against all human authorities that are still opposing God. So I think we can't avoid the fact that the ultimate conflict is not only a spiritual conflict, but it is going to mean the kingdom of God breaking through forcefully and decisively to take over our world, to restore it, but also to drive out, to destroy any that will not be part of God's kingdom. But there is no hint in Revelation that Christians picking up swords are the ones doing that. It's the heavenly armies. God will do it one day. And as Paul would tell the Ephesians, we do have that war now. We are part of that war now. But it is not against flesh and blood. Ephesians is the bit about the armor of God. And of course, he says, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, against the rulers and the authorities, and he goes on, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. We have the sword of the Spirit. That is our weapon, the sword of the Spirit. There may be other religions that have a strong and proud legacy of military conflict in the name of their religion. Christianity has the Crusades. I don't think the Crusades were a good legacy. I don't think they're biblically faithful. I think they were a disaster. I'm not going to have the final word on that. But spiritual warfare is what we're called to. God is a warrior. God is a fighter. God is the Lord of hosts. Jesus is the leader of the heavenly armies. And so when we are persecuted and we seem weak, and when Lieutenant Samuel Kamaleson was dismissed from the Indian Army for refusing with his regiment to enter the Sanctum Sanctorum while puja was done there, and the SC in November, the SC has said in that case, you are insulting your own group when you refuse to perform rituals. Our nation may no longer be a nation where we can comfortably say we are at peace within our own nation as Jesus' followers. Now that it is official, it is a legal ruling that you are insulting your own group when you refuse to perform rituals. Life may not be comfortable and easy for us. And our response, even when we are persecuted and will be persecuted more, and Jesus has said that we will be, big picture, our response, stand firm. Pray for those who persecute you. When Jesus said to Peter to put his sword away, all who draw the sword will die by the sword. He added, could I not be calling on my Father and he would send 10,000 angels? But then how would it be fulfilled, what the scriptures say? God has a big plan. God is powerful enough to bring about that plan. But God is loving enough and gracious enough that he longs for people to have time to join in with that plan. Let's play our part in it.